I was looking for an opportunity to practice in a way that it was like a collaborative effort, that I felt that I was part of a team approach to caring for animals throughout their life, and that we had a stance on this is standard of care. This is how we're going to stay on top of standard of care and be able to provide that.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the House Call Vet Cafe podcast. I'm Dr. Eve Harrison. I'm a full-time integrative concierge house call veterinarian in Los Angeles, and I help other vets to build their unique mobile practices on their terms. This podcast is for and by house call and mobile veterinarians, so it is meant to give our community a platform to connect, to share our stories, to lift each other up, and to support each other. Most of us work solo as lone wolves, right? So for me, it's been really powerful to be able to physically hear the voices of my colleagues from all over the world and to get a chance to feel that we truly are part of a community of very real other human beings who get it. While you may be alone in that little bubble of your own vehicle when you're on the road seeing patients, I welcome you to join our community by tuning into our own podcast when you're on your way to your next house call. Whether you're a super experienced house call vet with 30 years of experience, you're a brand new prospective house call vet just looking to get started, or you're house call curious, there will be something for you in this podcast. Each episode, you will hear interviews from other mobile veterinarians just like yourself who are doing unique and innovative things, vets who are sharing their stories, their struggles and challenges, and you can also look forward to hearing valuable information and perspectives from specialists and experts outside of our micro niche. And finally, if becoming a house call veterinarian is something that you've been thinking about exploring, or you're looking for some extra support getting your own mobile practice to feel more profitable and sustainable for you, check out the information in the show notes about my course and our above and beyond supportive private community for members only, plus our monthly group coaching sessions within the House Call Vet Academy. You can also check out my free public Facebook group, which is also called the House Call Vet Cafe, the same name as this podcast, and which is a warm and cozy community for mobile vets to support each other in professional and personal development, in creative entrepreneurship, and in friendship. So thank you guys for spending time with me today. Let's dive into the episode.
If you're looking for help with ultrasound scanning, whether that's choosing a new machine or developing your ultrasound skills, check out the First Opinion Veterinary Ultrasound website at fovu.co.uk for independent machine reviews and online and in-person teaching options. FOVU, simplifying ultrasound.
Okay, everyone, I am super excited today to have with us Dr. Laura Zehnder Jones, who received her DVM degree from Virginia Maryland Regional College of Veterinary Medicine in 2006. After initially working in Virginia, Laura moved to Pennsylvania, where she now resides with her rescued companions and one husband. Laura's favorite aspects of veterinary medicine are client education, preventative care, the complexities of internal medicine, and the human-animal bond. She's also very passionate about promoting adoption and rescue to help those who are in need in the most basic necessity of a loving home. So, interestingly, Laura used to be a house call vet, which is why we're interviewing her today, and one of the many reasons that she's such an interesting person and that I wanted to share with all of you guys. So, we're going to hear about that story. Aside from her previous house call and now clinical work as well, she also serves as the Veterinary Education Manager for Veterinarian Recommended Solutions, or VRS, which is a super awesome and different type of company that provides supplements and really takes care of veterinary professionals in a unique way that I've never really seen before. And so we'll get to hear a little bit more about that as well later. So welcome, Dr. Laura.
Thank you for having me. It's fun.
I'm happy to have you. So I wanted to start out the episode with how I always start out my episodes. What's your favorite snack to eat in the car, either now or when you were on the road doing house calls back in the day?
Oh, oh wow. Anything that, especially doing house calls, anything that's best chance getting into my mouth and not on the floor around me in my vehicle. But no, I'm a sucker. I can eat a weird amount of roasted nuts. flavored, unflavored, salted, unsalted. Yeah, I have no self control when it comes to that. So that's like a dangerous snack, but probably one of my most favorite ones to happen.
But I'm kind of a nut junkie too. Like my car always has nuts in them. Do you have a specific kind of nut that you like, or is it like the mixed bag?
Mixed is tough because then you have to actually like select what order.
Yeah.
You have a preference. No, we like regularly always have almonds in the house, and I'm weird with almonds. I actually like them roasted but unsalted, unless it's like wasabi flavor. Then max that out, and then
Ooh.
the salted cashews, absolutely, and then any type of peanut. Although we all know technically that's not a nut.
Oh yeah, you're right. Good point.
Staple. Yep.
That's awesome. Oh my God. I'm drooling right now thinking of salted cashews. Like, seriously, I wish I had some right now. So thank you for
I
sharing
do in
that.
the other room. I wish I could keep that.
Oh man, I have like drinks that I always drink during like the House Call Vet Cafe recording. We should be crunching on snacks.
I've made that mistake where, because I do, you'll obviously get to learn about, I do other webinars this in one of my roles a lot. And often when you're kind of jumping from one meeting to another, you just throw like a snack in your mouth and then you start the meeting and you think you're good. And all of a sudden that nut like hits you right here and you're like, oh, gotta play this one off.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. That's actually like one of the reasons that COVID has been cool is like having the mask because like I can eat God knows what in the car and then I don't have to worry about if there's like poppy seeds in my teeth or like
Yeah.
a nut or something. It's like there
Right.
mask or like did I eat something that was like garlicky or something? Who cares?
Yeah.
Mask.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know we did. There's onion breath up to wazoo.
God,
We
seriously.
that we are protected from right now. And it goes both ways, not just us being a little bit more protected from exposing our clients to whatever we just ate, but then they get to do that to us too, which is appreciated.
Exactly. So, Laura, you're a really interesting guest on this show and the first of your kind because you used to be a house call vet, but you aren't currently. So, I'm really interested, and I know I've had actually requests from my listeners to hear from someone who was a house call vet and moved away from it and what happened and what it I would just love to hear a little bit about so backing up, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself because I know what I want to ask you in just a minute. But can you tell me a little bit about your journey as a house call vet? We've spoken a little bit before this call. You mentioned that you love client education and bonding with clients and kind of moving away from factory medicine towards sustainability. Can you tell me a little bit about like your journey into house call practice? Because that's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. It was and you never know like the full summation of all the things that happened in your life to lead to that decision and finally just, rip the band-aid off and be like, I'm gonna do it. But probably the ones that I can pinpoint and identify more specifically was I had pursued a couple different clinic jobs as an associate veterinarian where I live in Philadelphia. And each job obviously has pros and cons, but one thing that was overlapping, this theme that I kept running into, really two things. One is that I felt like my ability to care for animals was always controlled and potentially limited by what the practice owner agreed to implement. And it wasn't just like make available. Like maybe I'm really big into checking blood pressures on cats, right? Like that's my thing, right? I want to make sure I identify hypertension in them. So they're going to give me a Doppler. Great. But if no one else at the clinic, the other technicians and associates that I work with, if no one else is taking that on, then I'm the only vet who's staying on top of that. And you start to feel a little bit isolated. So I was looking for an opportunity to practice in a way that it was like a collaborative effort, that I felt that I was part of a team approach to caring for animals throughout their life, and that we had a stance on this is standard of care. This is how we're going to stay on top of standard of care and be able to provide that. So sometimes I didn't feel like that was always being met either on providing all the options for us in the clinic setting, or just in a way that it was all of us implementing either that diagnostic test or that treatment in the same level and at the same number of patients who got exposed to that option. So that it starts to weigh on you over time. And it starts to kind of play the seed of like, okay, I've jumped around in a few different jobs and I keep running into this. All right, at some point, right? It's like when you're dating, like, is it me? what am I doing differently? Or what do I feel so like, why am I creating this importance that others don't seem to have? And then there was this other bigger weighing factor, which is I could get lost in an exam room. You sit me down on the floor with a patient and I'm talking to the client and I'm showing them whatever the diagnosis or concern is. And I'm explaining the anatomy behind it and I'm explaining what I'm going to do. And I can very easily fall behind in the schedule. So it created some dynamic in the clinic setting where I felt like the team I was working with was really appreciative of the care I was providing for animals, and they liked working with me because of that. At the same point in time, it was almost like, oh, Laura can't stay on track. We got to help keep Laura on track with appointment to appointment. And I work best with those technicians and assistants that were able to help me with that. But not everyone always feels like they have that control, right? To tell a vet to get out of an exam room, you spend enough time in there. So it's just always hard to just stay on schedule in a way that I felt that I was providing the most knowledge to that client and empowering that client to do what was best for that animal. So at some point, the summation of those two things led me to pursue mobile practice because it was then me dictating what my schedule was and how much time I wanted to spend and me controlling when I was going to arrive back at their house basically for the factory check, which is pretty great. So that's what led me to pursue mobile practice. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you on every level. It's so challenging presenting a unified front when you're working in a team, and every vet has different priorities and every vet has different clinical experiences that guide their decision making. And to have present the sort of continuity of care where everyone's on the same page is almost impossible. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very frustrating trying to present a unified front in terms of continuity of care when you're working in a team. And I think it's hard to work in a team when you're doing something as complicated and as emotionally challenging and complex as practicing medicine. And I hear you 100%. That's so very much why I also went into house call practice so that I could control my schedule. I could spend as much or as little time talking to people as I wanted and practice the exact medicine I wanted without someone looking over my shoulder and telling me if I could have a Doppler or not. That kind of thing. So I relate so much.
Right.
And so you, as I understand it, you ended up working for a house call company. So you didn't start your own necessarily, but you decided to work for a company that already existed providing house call services. Can you tell me a little bit about that decision, that
Absolutely.
experience?
Thinking it's inevitable to talk about that aspect of it because it was like the start was the start of the end with the decision I made there. So part of it was, it's sometimes hard to make that leap, not knowing, and I hadn't done mobile work before. I rode around with some mobile vets to get some exposure and see if this is something I would like. But part of me was also like, I know I'm going to like this, right? So that wasn't the medicine and how to implement medicine in the home setting wasn't the hurdle. The hurdle was like, all right, now I got to work with distributors, which I didn't have to be that inventory person before. And how do I handle surgery when I'm not going to have a van that I'm going to drive around with and do surgery for animals? So what do I do in that referral setting where a simple growth rule, they really don't need to spend the money on a specialist? Like, so there's all these other caveats, and a lot of it came down to the financials of the accounting aspect of like running your own business that caused me to decide to say, hey, it was almost like a step ladder fashion of getting into house call work, which was let's join this group. They cover a lot of the business aspect of being a house call veterinarian, which was appealing to me. The way they had it set up was basically I would work out of my home. I would send them, weekly or monthly requests for medications, basically my inventory that I need. They work with the distributor, so then they can ship it out to me. They hired and paid for the assistant or technician that I would ride around with. Not that I needed one every day, but for the most part, I did get to ride around with someone, which is really nice. And then the billing aspects, they would take care of as well. So it's kind of similar to then being at the clinic setting where it's, I'm going over the estimate and I'm taking care of the charges in the sense that they're functioning as the like mothership to the practice, basically.
Right.
And I like that because I was like, oh, I could, do this in a stepwise fashion. I could get my toes wet to see if I really like this and then decide how to expand this out or maybe not, and maybe just stick with this group if it works out so well. I think the idea that the veterinarian that owned that practice had was very commendable. And what she was trying to do was immensely commendable. I think the way it was played out, there was a lot of issues. So as much as I thought I liked the fact that someone else would be handling the inventory with me and creating relationships with distributors and our reference laboratories, it became frustrating because I was still having to manage my own inventory and then just send the request to them for what I need. I'm like, well, I'm taking the time to do it. And then I'm just waiting for them. And then I'm also getting shipped out stuff that expired. Now I'm not happy.
Oh,
So yeah, you see how this starts to the areas where you wanted to remove stress to improve your quality of life as a veterinarian from a practicing standpoint and be able to just dedicate more time to medicine and to client education was now the stress of the other components not falling into place. And then also realizing a lot of my paycheck, all my work of doing these individual appointments, the majority of that was going to this group and not to me. And then I wasn't benefiting from what they were taking, right? It's the fun. So, you ride it out for a bit. You listen to the reasons, and then at first you're like, "That's valid. All right, it's going to get fixed." And when other issues just mount on top of that and don't get resolved, eventually you do have to relook at that decision. And part of the reason that I wasn't able to continue with house call work was kind of twofold. But one was I think I didn't want to challenge the non-compete that was included in my employment there. So it was really an opportunity for a period of time to open my own house call practice and be able to still exist for being employed where I lived, basically. The radius was quite grand.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, wow. You're saying some things that are like a combination. I've heard this so many times before. I've experienced some of it. I'm triggered by some of it because it's bringing back memories. And like, I totally understand your experience. And it's really tricky because a lot of people kind of are afraid to start their own businesses. And they should be because it's very confusing. Like, we don't learn any of this in school. There's a lot that's like outside the realm of what we even have a clue about. And so people will say, "Oh, well, I'll let other folks handle the inventory. I'll let other folks handle the vendors, the accounting, the money." And then once you're rolling, you're like, "Oh, I could be doing all this myself, yet I'm paying someone else to do it for me." Or now I don't have control over the things that
Yeah.
affect my day-to-day functioning,
Yeah.
and like all that stuff is teachable. Like, you can learn all that, but it's so intimidating to people in the beginning.
It's very intimidating. And it was also like I was employed and I wanted to do something else. And I didn't want to have a period of time where I was figuring it out. Maybe a portion of that was just lazy. Right? I didn't want to
Desperate,
investigate for
though.
work. I just wanted to keep practicing and just have a different job that was more beneficial to me instead of potentially seeing the bigger picture of what they could have been.
Totally. And I've been there too. Like, I don't know that it's lazy. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there. I have a sneaking suspicion you're not lazy. But like, I have a feeling that if it's anything like my story, it was like desperation. It's like, I need something to change right now.
Yeah.
And like, what's the easiest path of least resistance? I don't know. Does that sound somewhat familiar? Or maybe lazy? I don't know. You're allowed to be lazy.
It is. And it's different too. There's a financial part of obviously what we do. I'm trying to figure out how I can word this, but it's so I'm married, and so one thing that has always weighed on me is I have exuberant student debt, and I graduated in '06, so it's overwhelming to think what our new grads are being released with right now. So factor that in. This is, years ago, the amount of debt I accumulated, but it was a lot more than the student loan debt that my husband has. And my husband has always made more money with me. And that irked me that I wasn't almost like an equal contributor to our financial situation. Right. So
Is he a
I
vet
didn't,
as well?
he is not a vet. That's
Okay,
right.
good.
100% difference. Yeah. Um, but I didn't feel comfortable, I would say, taking a pause in having an income with the amount of debt that I have. Or
Yeah.
right. So it creates a world where you almost have to like you're constantly moving forward. It's not necessarily as much. I didn't feel like I had as much opportunity to breathe because of that kind of like moving over your head.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I totally get that. The financial risk component of starting a
Mhm.
business is tremendous, and it's very scary for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also that little non-compete thing. I think that's
Non-competing.
that little
Which
thing.
is up here, it's hard to for an employer to enforce that is
Yeah,
I've learned, but it's still like, do you really want to get sucked up into that world and be
right.
if you're right to work? I don't know. It seems
Right.
like and it's often, it seems more risky than worth pressing those buttons. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a whole other subject. We could have a whole episode about non I have so many people who come to me and say, "I have a non-compete. I'm gonna start planning to do this in like 1 to 2 years." And it's like, "Okay, go talk to your lawyer because you gotta find the loopholes. You have to see if this is even enforceable in your state. Is it even legal to have a non-compete in your state?" Odds are if you've signed a non-compete, the person, whose non-compete it is has run it by their lawyer. So there's a lot that goes into that decision and a lot of people who get really scared and, I mean, you don't want to step on toes and you want good vibes with your previous employers and maybe you want to be able
Yeah.
to refer back to them and vice versa. And so,
Yep.
there's just so much to consider about that. So, but I hear you. That's a legit that's a legit thing.
Layers, right?
Oh yeah. So, can you tell me, we touched on this a little bit already, but can you tell me if there's anything you wish you'd known then that would have changed the outcome of things and maybe might have led to you still being a house call vet today?
100% unsolicited you. Um, no, it's very truthful. I felt a little bit, probably my own fault, but I created a little bit more of an island than I had wanted to. Like, obviously, pros and cons to everything we can do as a veterinarian, right? One of the things I always liked about the clinic setting was the camaraderie that can come about as a way to handle a lot of the stresses that we encounter on a daily basis. So, if you have a difficult client or a heart wrenching situation with a patient, you can turn to your coworkers and their look on their face can help you through that alone, more or less the conversations that can stem from it. So, once I was a house call veterinarian and I didn't have that team approach with me, one of the things I should have done is looked for resources to fill that void. And that's really I commend you what you're doing for house call practices, which is incredible. And I probably should have also just created my own network. Early on, when I was just starting, I went to lots and lots of local practices in the area, many of which I was familiar with, but never really got to know them. And I stopped in to introduce myself and kind of offered my services as a way to address needs that didn't interfere with their business, right? Because you never come across as a competitor or wanting to take their patient. But when you do have a person that's looking for a home euthanasia, or it is a fractious cat that just doesn't do well, and you need to get an accurate blood pressure, like call me. I can help you and I'll do that one task that you need. And then in a situation where there's a growth removal that I can't do, then I get to utilize you, right? Like build those relationships. I tried to do that early on, but it was more of a selfish endeavor where I was just trying to introduce myself so they would use me as a option as a health
That's
vet.
right.
I didn't continue to go back to those veterinarians in the area and continue to be a presence to let them know I'm still around. I'm here. Like, how can I help you? How can you help me? And that's one thing that so kind of twofold. There's more I could have done just personally in my own demographic, but then also having what you're putting together for house call vets is incredible. It's just a resource to say, I encountered this, like, what can I do? It's like how we all are addicted to VIN for the most part.
Yeah.
I think it's a way to have a network that you don't necessarily have direct contact with, which is incredible. Yeah.
Awesome. And bravo on that idea that you continue to develop the rapport with your network. That's a really, really smart thing. I'm still
Or
here.
I didn't. That's my problem is
Yeah, no, but the idea that that's, something that would have been helpful, that I want people who are listening to hear that because that's very true. It's a very, very good thought process.
hindsight's 2020, right?
Oh, yeah, always. Yeah, I mean, anything I know mostly is because I did it wrong the first time. I relate to that.
Yep. But that's what's so great about your academy is just to have this as a springboard for, for growth that a house call veterinarian can utilize, but didn't necessarily maybe even like know that that question would be something they would encounter. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for your support on that. There are a lot of components of the course that are based on things that I wish I'd known to even ask to begin with. And so I'm hopeful that I'm helping folks get to those bits of information before they realize that they didn't know them to begin with.
Right.
You know what I mean? That not knowing what you don't know kind of thing. And so we already sort of touched on this a little bit, I guess, as well. But given your experience as a house call vet that decided to move away from this path, do you have any advice for current or prospective house call vets who might be looking to get started? Like, should they just go out and do it on their own? Should they work for someone first? What did you learn the hard way that you hope no one else has to learn ever again?
I don't want to disparage because there are other house call groups out there. And so I don't want my one more negative experience to be reflective of the entire kind of more group approach that can be successful. So obviously investigate, probably ask more questions. There were some, red flags of like promises that were made early on where I was like, that sounds too good to be true.
Oh,
Often
yeah.
that is right. Right. The same one time I was like, I didn't expect it to be true, but if the promise was even half met, I was like, that sounds good. So I think it's just a little bit more investigatory work when you're deciding on to go about it on your own or to join an existing group and then build those connections and those resources because they're not just going to be there for you to help grow your house call practice well, but to better assist your patients in the long run. You never know how far your radius is going to go as a house call vet too. Often you can think like, oh, this is my traveling radius, but then you get a call for a case and you happen to have availability and you're like, I think I can get out there this week. Like, let's do it. And that's what it changes. And that's kind of fun to not have things so set in stone. So, building those resources, building those connections. And I don't think it's daunting. I don't know why I didn't do it more, but that's where I do think it could have made a big difference. I think there were things that I encountered that I struggled with that if I had others to bounce ideas off of and scenarios off of, that I would have felt more supported than I needed to feel isolated. I mean, even something as simple as and answer this for me if you don't mind. How do you handle when it is your own practice and now all your friends and family are using you as your veterinarian because even though they didn't live, within the radius of the clinic that you worked at, they were utilizing another vet. Well, now they're going to call you out to come to their home. And there was this almost like an expectation of I'm going to give you discounts at the same point in time. I'm like, I'm not making a whole lot starting off so, as a house call vet. So it's like navigating that was, I almost felt lucky that I could default to, oh, it's not my house. I don't make the rules for the discount
Uh-huh.
I can provide, right? Like, stop. So things like, but you wanted to be able to do that more because often your best clients can really help grow your practice. So it's like navigating the discounts is always such a tricky word in veterinary medicine because you shouldn't discount medicine. We're qualified, impressive professionals. And discounts are like, your cold coupon that comes in the mail. But yeah, like there's things like that I just never like really probably felt comfortable with because I didn't know who to go to for those answers. So that's where this academy can be.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I understand that very well. I've had those same experiences and worked my way out of them. And they still, I mean, some of those things are still challenging and will always be challenging because of the nature of the work and the nature of you're in someone's home and there's a natural intimacy that develops. And especially if it's a friend or family member, those boundaries can get real blurry real fast. And then you feel obligated to discount. And then before you know it, every patient you have is being discounted and you're working your ass off. And
Yep.
very, very easy, very slippery slope. Yeah, I also like what you said. You can say something like, "It's not my practice. I don't make the rules." And I use a variation of that now. Like my practice manager won't let me. It's like,
Nice.
and like my
Yes.
own practice manager is the boss of me. It's not really that way, but like my accountant won't let me lower my prices anymore. She said I can't. Or my attorney said I'm not allowed to do that. So I blame it on someone. I do the false, like you know,
Absolutely.
the good cop, bad cop technique where it's like if I'm having a hard time holding a boundary or I feel guilty and or people just don't accept my boundaries, which happens too. Some people don't understand boundaries. You have to give them an authority that said, this cannot be done.
Right. Right.
That's one little trick that I tell people since you asked. But it's an ongoing thing and it's a really unique boundary puzzle for house call vets specifically.
Mhm.
And I'm really glad you brought that up because it's a common problem. And there are definitely ways, but it's something that requires work and techniques and, this and that.
Yeah. Another thing that I should have mentioned is looking back, like what could I have done differently to improve my ability to stay employed as a house call veterinarian? But it was probably I put so much emphasis and work to grow my following as quickly as possible. And then when it didn't achieve that, felt pressured that it was like from a financial perspective too, I had to look into other options. And one bit of advice that was given to me that I did not utilize was starting off, I should have done on two jobs so that I had some steady income to feel reliant on and create a level of comfort in my life. And then as the house call practice grew, reduce that, eventually remove it. And instead, I was like, guns blazing. I'm
Oh,
going to do
yeah.
it. I'm going to do it 110%. And I tried and it didn't grow fast enough in the time frame that I gave it. Yeah.
Oh, I totally understand that. And that's a really common thing. It's really, really common. I think one of the few things that I did that did work for me was that I sort of like titrated my house call work and untitrated my relief work basically. So
Yep.
I was doing relief and house call concurrently all the time until I had a sustainable house call practice. So it took the pressure off. But
Right.
you're definitely not alone. So many people kind of get into that like high pressure situation or having to take clients that aren't a good match because you're desperate and you're hungry and
Yeah.
you need to pay your bills and your loans and it's
Yep.
very, very tricky. So I understand. I totally get that. Man. Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting industry we have, right? Like what other industry do you have to have two jobs while you build your practice? And like it's just
True.
interesting.
True.
With relief work and house call, those are the two most kind of modalities of working in veterinary medicine that have the most freedom. And so when you put them together as you're starting, it's a really beautiful combination, I find, or helpful. It's sort of stepping stone type stuff. But thank you.
It's not that. Yeah, relief work is great for fitting both of those needs. But there's also the opportunity where I could have done just some shift work at hospitals in the area that, and especially now, my goodness, there's such a demand. You really could probably have much more control. I mean, for the most part, people want to hire full time, but there's such a demand for vets. We are in an opportunity now that was not as existed back when I was in this scenario where you have more say as an employee of someone else and you potentially can dictate a little bit more in your schedule that was not as much of an opportunity before. So you could very well just say, hey, I'm going to do, 2 days at this clinic that's within a certain radius of your home that you're comfortable driving to and being their associate veterinarian and then work separately. And I was surprised too how many vets that start to reveal like, oh yeah, like we were thinking about, having some way to do some, house call work out of our clinic. And oh my goodness, yeah, I actually did years ago when I was between jobs, I did some house call work and I really liked it. It starts to just open up now this like, oh, I'm not a threat. I'm your
Right.
coworker, even to have a different business per se. So I wouldn't want anyone to not investigate that as an option because it's one that I probably put more weight on, is worried I would come across as a competitor or potentially
Yes.
steal their patients because of all these non-competes that we get exposed to throughout our careers. When in actuality, I think a lot of times it can be viewed as a benefit to that practice as well, to know over time they can build a relationship with you for those clients and patients that just need it. There's just some that they
That
can't get into the clinic. They can't. They need us.
so,
Yeah.
so true. So true. There's so much symbiotic connection and relationship that can happen between house call and brick and mortar practices. And it's just a matter of presenting things in a way so that people see the benefit to them and, just respectful and courteous of someone else's business and approach them with the understanding that you can help each other. You're trying to be clear that you're not stepping on their toes. And I mean, I think that the question about competition comes up and it needs to be thought about and handled with sensitivity and then moved through. And I think it's very possible. And I love that. I think it's something we should all work towards even more.
Absolutely.
I love that. So you did the house call practice with this company for a while. How long were you there? How long did it take for you to realize this is not going to work? And then what did you do after that?
Sure. It was 3 years that I did house call work full time before I pursued other endeavors. And I probably would have stayed with it a little bit longer, but there were some kind of red flags happening with that house call group that I worked for. And actually, a couple months after I had turned in my resignation, the group dissolved. So I would have at some point have been forced to, yeah.
I have
Um,
I never actually asked you what company it was. We'll talk after this, but I'm wondering if the company you work for is the same one that I started working with in the beginning, and it was not pretty. And it was I went into it because I was afraid to start my own. I thought I was gonna, like, have some support, and it ended up just being an utter disaster, and that's another reason I wanted to start the House Call Vet Academy because I had such an atrocious experience that I was like, "I know people are gonna go to companies like this to try and start house call practice because that's what they wanna do, but they don't
right.
know." And so, I can't wait to connect with you afterwards and find out what it was. Anyway, red flags, off you go.
Right. But I did want to say the name of this because I'm like, you never know both sides, right? Like
Right,
there's
right.
my experience, but who knows what's happening on the opposite. So just to be fair, but yeah, off
Of course.
camera, I
Yes.
will happily reveal. So there was that component where there was just enough red flags that I didn't foresee this being a viable option. And then there was also a opportunity to get back into clinic setting rather easily with just some connections that I already had. And then there was a job opening for this supplement company that I do work for now that did really pique my interest. So it's kind of like a combination of things that enabled me to go in a different direction. Yeah.
Very cool. I'm glad you listened to those red flags. There's a lot of folks out there, a lot of companies that make big promises. And when your gut told you, and I'm glad you listened eventually, sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to be like, yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. It all adds up now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the company you're working with now. And, tell me a little bit about VRS and why it's different from other companies that provide supplements. It's just like a really cool company that I'm pretty excited about.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I do work part time at a clinic in Philadelphia, which I really do enjoy. It's something probably any vet who goes into industry says they never thought they'd be in industry, right? So I'm a broken record there. I am that vet. Like, I never thought I'd be in the industry. But what's nice about working for VRS stands for Veterinarian Recommended Solutions is I did not have to give up that identity of a practicing veterinarian. So it's never been imposed on me to work for them 5 days a week. I do have flexibility to still do clinic work, which I love. As much as there are days I go into the clinic and I'm like, I can't believe I still do this when you have like a bad day or you upset one client and you're like, I can't win. And you have that weighted stress on you, which we've all experienced. I keep going back to it. I can't say no to patients. I can't say no to like educated clients. I have to do it. If I don't do it, I lose a portion of who I am, right?
Yeah.
And this is not to say that those who do go industry full time are in any way doing something that makes them less of a veterinarian. Absolutely not. It was just for me, I couldn't see not still doing that in some regard. So I had actually started utilizing VRS's supplements in practice while I was a mobile vet. And then there was obviously this opportunity to join them. But I was really kind of blown away. I had signed up for some local CE. Some of this is just serendipitous where I happened to be living in the city where the company started. So I just had an opportunity to be exposed early on. And at the CE was actually a board certified veterinary surgeon talking about his clinical trial on the fish oil product, Omega Benefit. And then they had two board certified veterinary dermatologists talking about their atopic dermatitis clinical trials. We have two studies. They're some of the largest omega-3 studies ever done in dogs. They're everything that we want, right? Randomized, double blind, placebo controlled. And I was like, this is exciting because I've always enjoyed multimodal therapy, right? That's how I get sucked into appointment and I can't leave is because I want to go over the options and come up with a plan that is manageable and best for that patient. And utilizing just one drug or just one nutrition approach or just weight loss or whatever it is not enough. If we can add in different treatment modalities, I can improve the outcome, right? So I'd always utilize supplements some in practice, but never felt great about it, right? It was like you'd go to eat and you'd be reminded that, yeah, fish oil or, you know, joint supplements here. And you're like, oh, yeah, I got to incorporate those back in. But then when I was back in the clinic setting, and if a client would ask, which one do I use? I had a hard time being specific because the supplement world is buyer beware, right? There's no way around it. There's no regulation enforcing companies to do clinical trials or to even show that their labels are accurate. Like it's that insane. And you add in this weight that we all carry as veterinarians, not wanting to rack up someone's bill.
Right.
And we want to provide evidence-based approaches, but we want to also provide multimodal therapy. So it was this struggle to actually have a confident recommendation. And I feel like that's what Muras provided. It was this combination of science, but then also safety. The one thing that really did blow me away is they send a portion of every lot to independent laboratories to have label claim accuracy assessed and to make sure there's no contaminants and impurities in there. And that's where I was like, where have you been?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It's
like
a way
that.
it's a way to legitimize a very unlegitimate industry,
Right.
basically. So I started using their products in practice, felt really good about them, and
Ethically as
it's all
well.
what's that?
We talked a little bit about ethical fish oil type products because both of us are plant-based eaters, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I was like, "So where does your fish come from? How do they handle it? Tell me
Yeah,
about it
you're
before I
right.
can speak another word to you."
Exactly. Yeah, that does go into, the production of the products is, despite having higher standards in science and safety, paying attention to sourcing, and then I'm also paying attention to a price point. You can't be the most expensive product on the market because, again, vets are very conscious of, how much that bill is adding up for that client. So on a cost per day basis, they're still competitive. And then, yeah, like our fish oil, it's what we call pelagic sourcing, like your mackerel, your sardines, your anchovies, small fish, high reproductive rate, short lifespan versus like cod or salmon, which are large fish, long lifespans, higher chance to accumulate heavy metals and toxins. So we want to actively advocate again using salmon as a fish oil source. So sustainably sourced and then less chance to accumulate toxins from the ocean. And then it also goes through organic filtration and microdistillation. And then the final product is independently tested. So yeah, it's a way to make sure we're providing the safest, but then not wiping out our ocean supply
Yeah,
of our fish. Yeah.
so important. Thank you for sharing with me about that. That was something that really impressed me when we last spoke, and I was asking about the fish sourcing, and and I'm concerned about that. I don't wanna kill our oceans, et cetera. So I love that there's so much attention and ethical sourcing and thought behind that. That's
Yeah.
really important. And so I'd also love to hear a little bit about how what you guys do is specifically helpful for vets and might be specifically, even more specifically helpful for house call and mobile vets as well.
Absolutely.
So you
Yeah.
guys have like just a unique sort of relationship with veterinarians that I think is really admirable.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, obviously, what drew me to the company is higher standards in evidence and safety. But the big picture behind VRS is VRS was founded by veterinarians and we are run by veterinarians. So we are a solution to not just the supplement industry, the nutrition industry itself, but actually a solution for veterinarians because one of the issues that we've all experienced is we take time out of our lives to learn about the products we recommend. We then take time during an appointment to educate our clients on those products. And then our clients can open up their phone, find that product online at a fraction of the cost that often we can even purchase it at wholesale. And this is so hurt the veterinary industry because we don't have a whole lot, particularly factoring in if you're working at a brick and mortar clinic setting, there is such a high cost to run that clinic. There's so much overhead, not just all the employees and all the fancy equipment that we have, but the building itself, the licenses that go into it. There's so much
Kind of
that the
education.
profit margin is minimal. So when food got taken away to Chewy.com, right? Food was, a way to help the clinic
Fair
and
enough.
everything. And then medications went online and
Now telemedicine is getting taken away from us.
everything's
God.
getting, yeah, us as what we do, and then what we do to help keep clinics open is being chipped away at and aggressively. I'm presenting with Independent Veterinary Practitioners Association next week because we have that same urgency to address how can we actually help veterinarians combat and provide solutions to, otherwise, an industry where there aren't many ways to have an income, right? Like
Right.
it's the products you sell, it's the diagnostic tests, the services you provide, and then it's your exam. And if you don't have products to sell and all those refills are being robbed away to Chewy and Amazon and 1-800 Pet Med, and then clients are looking at us and going, "You keep upping your exam and your blood work fee." And you're like, "That's all I got." Like,
Yep.
so,
Yep.
so what can we do, right? Well, what's amazing about VRS is from the get go, they chose to be exclusive. So our
Veterinary.
products are not found anywhere else. They're
Separate.
available through vets, and that's it. We're not on Chewy.com. We're not on 1-800 Pet Meds. We're not on Amazon. We're not on eBay. We're not at PetSmart. We're not at Petco. We are a company that is by vets and for vets. And a level of that exclusivity was then really what enabled us to provide a mechanism, really the infrastructure to increase compliance when a vet makes a recommendation. But then here's kind of the icing on the cupcake is actually continuous profit stream with refills supplying revenue for your practice. And that's where I actually thought when I joined URFs and I had this opportunity to educate other veterinarians on the product science, I was like, this is gonna be so much fun. Like, I can't wait to work with the advisory board and be that person that gets to connect remotely with veterinarians and give them better quality products. And a little hesitant to talk more about the business and the wins there with veterinarians. And honestly, now it's equal. I feel like VRS is that whole package of just really addressing where there are major frustrations, not only in the supplement nutrition space, but then also just within the veterinary industry itself and having solutions to have vets feel supported. For the first time, really, I don't know another company that is doing that level of recognition, but then also answering.
Totally. Yeah, that's really cool. I love the involvement of the company just in general in kind of lifting the industry and providing resources and good products for our patients and trustworthy and research oriented and evidence based. I love that. Very, very, very cool.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then to answer your question on how this actually helps house call veterinarians, and that is probably one of the coolest things is veterinarians can recommend our products and you do not have to have a large amount of wholesale So you don't have to have a lot of inventory. Obviously, inventory space is a commodity as a mobile vet.
Right.
And you don't actually have to have any inventory to recommend our products. And you still get to utilize the ability to have increased compliance when you make a recommendation, but then also a continuous profit stream that's there even when you're not out on the road and going to your clients and patients. That's huge. The other thing that I didn't even recognize about the way that VRS is supporting particularly house call veterinarians, myself working behind the scenes with a house call vet actually pointed this out to me. And it was like one of those, you're right. This is so cool. This was a couple of years ago. I was actually traveling for VRS to do a presentation in another city. And I had a meeting with a house call vet who was in Florida in that afternoon. So like I logged in remotely and, I was with the rep through obviously like a webinar type connection. And we were just, she was an existing partner veterinarian of ours. And I was just answering questions. We were going over the products she's used and like cases that she can use them in addition to where she's used them. And then some of our newer products. And she actually stopped me partway through the conversation, informal presentation I was conducting and was like, I just want to let you know, I think it's so cool that I'm a house call vet. I'm a one person business and I get to have you on the medical affairs side meeting with me whenever I need to. And I was like, I never thought about that. But one of the frustrations with the way the industry is set up for house call vets is sometimes distributors don't recognize us as valuable because we don't purchase in the large volumes
Right.
that a clinic does or a specialty clinic does, right? So often we don't
Chewy
get that
does.
yeah, that Chewy does. You're right. So often house call vets, because we are smaller practices, they don't get the same recognition nor time and may not even have like a rep that lets them know about things that are available to them, or you can't purchase that minimum because you focus on a different type of quality care than the amount of volume that a clinic can see. So when she stopped me and she was like, I just think it's so cool that you guys recognize me as a equal player on the field as a veterinarian that owns a clinic, a brick and mortar clinic. She was like, I just really appreciate that. And I was like, I didn't even think about that. You're so right. Like, and actually house call vets they're some of our best partners because it's that combination of just the more dedication to client education that house call vets, I just think organically, either that's what cause you to gravitate to that field or just innately it just happens when you're in someone's home and just the more relaxed setting. So when you get that opportunity to be like, hey, don't waste your money on that fish oil from Costco. This is why. It's such a more powerful product recommendation than sometimes veterinarians that who work in the clinic setting and they're potentially double booked.
Right. At every moment.
Be double booked. And then I'll call it. That there is this level of education that can be provided anytime a vet recommends one of our products. So bottom line is I view house call veterinarians as just gold. They're so fun to work with. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we're an awesome group. And I think maybe you mentioned this that you guys drop ship, right? So we don't have to carry anything. You guys
Correct.
just ship it and that part is all handled by you guys. Very convenient, right?
Yep. Yeah. So all vets really need to do is just, when we do have a case where they feel one of our products is medically indicated, they can recommend that product to the veterinarian. Then there's an easy connection that can be made to let us know you want us to provide that product for that specific patient. And then we take care of the rest for you. And in that's how we're actually able to increase compliance, which is critical, right? There is no single bottle or single bag cure with nutritional intervention. There's a need for long-term use to obtain and then maintain those health benefits. So our goal in improving compliance is kind of multifold. It's just because the profession itself has always struggled with compliance. So how can we address that? But when a vet takes a moment to recommend our products, we have to do our due diligence to take the time to make that effort worthwhile.
Awesome. Thank you so much for telling me all about that and telling our listeners all about how things work.
My convoluted story of
Yeah. No, but it's really, really interesting. People's paths and our industry is just such a weird place. And people have to do kind of like loops and spirals and twists and turns to find where they belong. And for some folks, house call is where we land. For some, house call practice is where we pass through and it informs what we do next. And so it's really cool to hear your story and hear how, what you know about house call practice has helped you to help other house call vets in what you're doing now. So thank you for that really, really cool perspective. And I wanted to just ask if there's anything else that you want before we close that you want anyone else to know about you or about VRS or house call practice. Any closing comments?
I think for anyone who's considering opening up their own house call practice, one of the coolest things that I did not appreciate until I was in it was the ability to take an accurate history. So, there's so much that you had to learn throughout your career of how to word a question to get the information that you needed to get a better picture of what was happening with that patient. And when you're in someone's home, to know that all those times I asked, do you measure the food? Do you use a measuring cup? And then the amount of times I encountered just bowls of food throughout the house overflowing. It's just one example, but you get such a visual history. I missed that. So for anyone who's considering it, that might be one of the most eye-opening things I encountered, and one of the coolest things. Can also be a hurdle too. Where you're like, there's no climbing structures for this cat, right? Like,
Yeah.
where's the environmental enrichment? And then, the dog's struggling to get onto the couch and you're like, it needs a ladder. It needs like a ramp.
Yeah.
We can help you. And then we need to treat that pain. We can help you. There's so much that I think is immensely valuable from that perspective that I miss and I don't have now. But it also has allowed me to, alter how I ask my questions just with that experience, which is pretty cool. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it's fun little tidbits of different ways we provide care.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I think that the things that we see in the home in real time, how the animal is functioning, how they're eating, how they're moving in their own home, it's like invaluable information to be able to provide really good care ultimately, because we know and we see what's going on. So
Yeah.
I love that. So true. One of my favorite parts of being a house call vet as well. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep. And hang on to those little victories. That's the only thing I can say. Like, obviously what veterinarians do is incredibly commendable. It's a tough time right now to be a veterinarian, and you do what you need to maintain a healthy perspective and your mental health, whatever that solution is. And just know that, what you do is incredibly valuable. So that nothing better than that human animal bond. When the veterinarian gets involved, it only enhances it. So kudos to everyone listening.
Love that. Thank you. And in summary, since we're in the House Call Vet Cafe podcast, can you tell me what's your favorite tea, coffee, or other beverage to drink?
Iced coffee. I actually didn't drink coffee for a very long time until enough people pointed out, they're like, you really like stouts and porters. Why don't you drink coffee? There's so much of like the coffee flavor that just part of the malt aspect of dark beer that I love. I was like, yeah, I should venture into it again. And I got to just start getting back into the world of coffee, or I should say for the first time getting into the world of coffee. So iced coffee with either almond milk or some kind of not dairy milk, no sugar. Weirdly, I'm not anti-sweet
I'm the same.
at all, but I don't do sugary coffee, but iced coffee. I now need it every day.
Awesome. Yeah, that's delicious stuff, especially with oat milk. And cheers to, what is it? Oatmeal stout. Those are
Yeah.
good. Oatmeal stouts.
Yeah.
Do you like those?
Oh, yes. Absolutely. So delicious. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm now in the mood to go get a nice coffee. I'm going to do that immediately after this call. But thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for everything you do for our profession and for getting it and for understanding and, for articulating some of the challenges that we all face so beautifully. And, for the encouragement for our listeners who are out there who are starting house call practices or are house call practitioners, and just knowing that any of their struggles that they might be having out there, they're not alone. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much again for being here with me today.
I appreciate you as well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to see what you title this as
We'll see. My gears are turning.
veterinarian who failed at house call work. I'm still smiling, so it's okay.
That's awesome. All right. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Too.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the House Call Vet Cafe. If you enjoyed this episode, then hit the subscribe or follow button on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to miss an episode. This podcast is made specifically for you, so don't be shy if you'd like to reach out and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook as the House Call Vet Academy, where I also share more valuable content. If you're interested in learning more about consulting for house call vets or the House Call Vet Academy online course and community, please click on the link in the show notes. Have an amazing rest of your day, and I can't wait for you to join us for our next episode of the House Call Vet Cafe.